which says publish or perish. And we have this system of promotion where you are required to publish articles to get your API score. Now that pressure house makes you to want to publish faster and in several places. So the tendency is you write one article and then keep molding it, remodeling it, and pass on the same information in several other journals as independent publication. That is not acceptable at all. Your work has to be original and independent. Multiple publication is a redundant publication, or concurrent publication of the same thing is a misconduct. So a paper which is already published previously for consideration of sub-journal cannot be submitted for publication again, and the publishing house has certain policies regarding that. The authors and the editors of the journal concerned must agree to the secondary publication wherever it is important. Maybe you have added something new or you have modified your earlier thought. We know many jurisprudential writers, they have, even Bentham, so to say, he had an idea for some time, and then his Rawls also, then eventually he republished that saying that, well, I was not correct in these places. I'm revising my opinion on those places. That can happen, and that can happen only with the agreement between the editors and the author. And that the editorial board should feel is important to let the readers know that the original idea is being modified or revised. Confidentiality again for everybody involved in research, especially publication process. Confidentiality is the important thing. It is the important thing because you are dealing with manuscripts. Manuscripts which can be distorted, modified, changed, so many, even stolen. Therefore, this is very important that you keep all this information confidential. Even the authors can ask for written permission for using some work and keep that permission as an evidence of authentic approach to somebody to use that person's material or that person's information. This is all confidential activities and which must be preserved by the user. It's very important. In the other presentation also I have been speaking about language. Language of a researcher must be very, very carefully chosen. And as far as possible, the language must be couched in a positive frame. As far as possible, use inclusive language rather than exclusive and negative language. Use a positive language as far as possible. Make it broad and include, take an inclusive approach to your research. More importantly, each word must be weighed, interpreted, understood, and then written so that it does not have an adverse impact on the reader or listener. Assumptions without research is to be avoided. You cannot make random assumptions. You cannot use words which may imply that one individual is superior or better than the other. You cannot use language which will hit, race, age, sex, gender, so on and so forth. So these are very important issues relating to the language you may be using. I have read many texts which only uses the word he. And one of my mentors, Upendra Bakshi, he always used to say, she includes he. And the current form of writing is S/HE, which means he or she, which is supposed to be gender neutral. And I personally prefer gender neutral expressions. So it could be chairperson rather than chairman or chairwoman, as many of the writers like to refer. Mostly we say air hostess or stewardess, but it's a better word, flight attendant. Therefore, these kind of gender neutral, conscious use of gender neutral expressions, inclusive expressions, inoffensive expressions are very important for a researcher to keep in mind while writing an article or a thesis. This I have dealt in my other presentation also. Authorships, especially co-authors, a panel of authors, it can't be done on request. It has to be contributed. Each author's contribution to the article or the book must be very clearly made out. It just can't be that I have a scholar and whatever the scholar is writing, I just include my name. That is research misconduct. Contribution of the co-author and the permission of the co-author that his name may be used is very important. I have myself faced a situation where an article was published with my name but without taking permission from me, and I was personally not in agreement with the content of the article. But the person who wrote that was a student of mine, and I had to expressly state that I did not give permission to use my name and request the publishing house to remove my name from that article. This is embarrassing for the co-author as well as the author. It discredit for you because you have done some publication misconduct, and you may lose credibility with the publishing houses. So it's very important to have a written consent from your co-author that the name can be given. And very important also to keep in mind, in the case of co-authors, the extent to which that co-author has contributed to the actual writing of the article or the book. That being done, when you agree that your name can be published as a co-author, you take collective responsibility for the content and the opinion expressed in the article. That was my difficulty. I was completely in disagreement with what was being said in the article, but had I allowed my name to be used, I would be responsible for what is written in that article. So this is, the co-authors must also be very, very alert, in fact all of us, that our names are not being used without our permission, especially for sensitive opinion expressed in an article or a book. This is an era of environmentalism, where we are very conscious of human rights, animal rights and stuff like that. So whenever the authors or the researcher are publishing a material which includes human or animal subjects, there should be a clear, specific statement in writing about what was done and whether the safeguard laws in place have been adhered to. This is a very, very important aspect of research. And many of you would have seen in movies especially, where there is a note saying all matters relating to animals are graphic, no actual animal has been used. Or medicines, especially therapeutic medicines, which say animal cruelty was avoided, stuff like that. So this is a very important declaration to be made where you are dealing with humans or animal subjects. Declaration of competing interests. The World Association of Medical Editors defines conflict of interest, and I'll read this quote: a divergence between an individual's private interest, competing interest, and his or her responsibilities to scientific and publishing activities, such that a reasonable observer might wonder if the individual's behavior or judgment was motivated by considerations of his or her interest. In other words, avoid personal bias in what you are doing. Your writing should be above personal bias, and wherever necessary, they should either disclose in the manuscript any financial or personal relationships with other people or organization that could be viewed as inappropriately influencing their work. Even this is a open democracy, and many of you would be knowing that the judges, if they have any substantial interest in the parties, especially companies, they have to declare a conflict of interest and decline to sit in judgment or sit on the bench dealing with the case. In fact, Prashant Bhushan's case is something very close to an allegation relating to this kind of activity. And so this is important that you either openly say that I am not able to do the research or publish the work, or you may publish the work saying that I had this much of involvement with the parties or whatever, but there should be a clear declaration and commitment regarding competing interests. Financial supports, funders, all must be very clearly stated in the study design, how it influences your collection, analysis and interpretation of data. Fundamental error notification is also important. Give and take 5%, give and take 2%, give and take 1%. These are standard practices where you say that I have done the analysis mathematically, but there could be a possibility of a 0.1% error or 1% error. Now, editors and the publishing houses must be clearly told about these possibilities. This is not wrong. It would be wrong if you hid the possibility, if you suppressed that there is a swing. But if you are able to justify the swing and show that, tell the readers, examiners, publishers, editors, reviewers, that there is a possibility of that much of swing of accuracy, and that's acceptable. It is not wrong, but you should be able to justify that. Okay, why that kind of a swing is taking place. Image integrity, I keep saying 101 times that it is very important. Now this image integrity is you are taking an image which is already published and then you change the brightness, contrast, color palettes, dimensions, modify the image, and then you present it as if to reflect your hypothesis or your idea. That is a misconduct. But if you are going to do that to show difference in thought, difference in the previous published image and the communication made by that image and this image which you have made and the communication that the image is making, and kind of justify the difference between the two images, it's not a misconduct. But if you just modified that, distorted that and presented it as saying this is my finding and this is how I present my data, that would be a misconduct. Allegations of misconducts should be very carefully handled, and there should be a clearly described process. I keep saying this, that there should be an SOP, clearly laid down flow chart on how to handle when a issue of misconduct is alleged before the editorial board or the publisher. Now I come to the publisher's responsibility. Publisher is basically a guardian of the scholarly records. Each book and article is a scholarly record, and by publishing it, the publisher is telling the world at large, it is a declaration in rem that what I have published is authentic, genuine, and worth referring to and using it as an important information in the knowledge bank. It is this serious responsibility a publisher takes when a publisher publishes a book, article, journal, etc. So this is a very, very important part of publishing, and he is, so to say, making a declaration in rem to the world at large that you are invited to read this because I have done something new, something authentic, something genuine, and something trustworthy. And to do that, the publisher has to take certain natural precautions. A. Safeguard the editorial independence. The editors should not be committed editors. There should be best practices set by the industry. Editors should be provided with technical, procedural and legal support. Educate researchers on publication ethics. So most of the time, all the teaching faculty, fraternity, I'm sure, get offers from publishers saying, why don't you write a book on this, or why don't you write a book on that, or why don't you write a book on that. Many of us are researchers and we agree to write, but a mechanical process sometimes makes us deviate. It's good if the publishing house has a discussion on publishing ethics with the researcher, and also to see whether the researcher has no competing conflict of interest with the policies of the publishing house. This is not done by the publishers, at least not in India, to my knowledge. But this is a very important aspect and the publishers should follow it. Authorship and contributorship, the publisher also should have a clear policy. When an article or a book comes to the publisher with several authors, the publisher should request a written permission for co-authorship, and wherever necessary also for proof of contribution, how much each one had contributed, because there can be a post-publication challenge as well. Now this is very important. There should be clearly laid down policies regarding authorship and contributorship. And journal should, there is no thumb rule except by so far as copyright violation is concerned. There is no thumb rule how to deal with these kind of deviations. Each house has its own policies laid down, which is generally publicized, and if nobody challenged, it is the rule of that publishing house. Conflict of interest must be very clearly laid down, explained and resolved. Data and producibility of data should be genuinely preserved when it is used in your writing, and also reporting guidelines, registration of clinical trials, etc. must be very clearly laid down, at least for the publisher and the editor. Ethical oversight should include, but is not limited to, policies on consent of publication, publication on vulnerable populations, ethical conduct of research using animals, etc. These are oversights, but this must be corrected. These are considered to be publication misconduct, and there can be many other such kind of matters which is not exhaustive. Intellectual property. All of you know what's an intellectual property. Intellectual property is just like the tangible property we have. It can be stolen, it can be robbed, it can be assigned, it can be gifted, and it can be sold for money as well. Therefore, it's a very precious component, and nobody is allowed to steal it. Stealing an intellectual property is as good as a theft. And in case of publishing, copyrights steal the show actually. Plagiarism, if you copy from others, do not acknowledge, if you misrepresent somebody's writing, all these are part of distortion of intellectual property, and this constitutes publication misconduct. Redundant overlapping publication is also intellectual property violation. Journal management is very important, and there should be proper business models, policies, processes, softwares which is being used by the publishing house or the journal institution, or for our university for that matter. This is very crucial, and we should have a well laid out process of how to follow these steps. What are the policies, what are the safeguards that we have to take. Peer review process is again important, and I have already discussed it several times, but this is also important in case of publication and handling conflict of interest. And if there is a conflict of interest, appeals, disputes, complaints can take place, and the houses should have a well laid down policies. We can also take recourse to the legal process dealing with violation of intellectual property. There can be post-publication discussion and correction also. Umpteen number of examples are there that even after publication there has been certain issues raised and again it has been sent for post-published peer groups. There are sites such as PubPeer, that is published peer groups. they have mechanism for correcting, revising, retracting articles after publication. Very commonly popular is the addendums and corrigendums that are published after publication of an article or a piece, especially in journals and newspapers. So the core practices will include a flow chart. It's very important to have a flow chart, how to handle cases of misconducts. Infographics is actually a visual presentation of how to deal with it. So flow chart can be followed by an infographic by showing this after this and all that. There can be a best practice guidelines from the university or the publishing house. Discussion documents in case of any unforeseen situations, if it arises, there can be discussion documents circulated within a committee of editors or research observers or moderators. Periodic newsletters, presentation archives telling the researchers how it is done and what is to be done is a good idea. E-learning modules, letter templates, self-audit tools, journals are mechanisms to check violation of publication ethics. In addition to that, seminars, workshops, webinars can also help. Infographics will help you to recognize potential manipulation of peer review process. Patterns of activities will suggest to you where the violations can take place. So it's very important to have an infographic along with the flow chart. Now I come to two cases where irregularity took place.